All right. So actually, I'm going to change the view here. There we go. So I want to introduce everyone to an amazing woman, Lisbeths Journey, and she is actually a part of the upcoming Neurodivergent Mind and Body Group that we have been working very, very hard on and are very excited about starting April 4th. So Lisbeth, want to say hello to everybody?
Yeah, hi there. I am so excited to be chatting with you on this and all things neurodivergent. All the things.
Yes, because for those of you who are listening and not watching this over on YouTube, Lisbeth is also an ADHDer.
Very much.
So she is going to have that perspective as well to bring to Neurodivergent Mind and Body, which is very exciting.
Yes.
So can you tell us all a little bit about your ADHD journey?
Oh gosh. So my ADHD journey started, well, I mean, let's be real. It started when I was much, much younger. When we started looking at it and when it started are two very different things. Definitely had it all growing up. I was one of those, you know what? I never made it into gifted and talented, like the GT. I was like 2 points away on the test.
Me too.
And it drove me nuts.
1 point.
Yes, I was like 1 or 2 points away and I was so angry. But
Yeah.
anyway, so it started much, much further beyond. Like I was the kid who would like climb up in trees and read in school, like after school. I would flip books upside down to like read them just for fun. Like I don't know why I thought that was fun. It's not fun for me now. But when I actually started paying attention to it, still didn't realize it was ADHD. I came up in the era of college where everyone was seeking Adderall to study. I'll be really, really honest about this. And I was like, I can't focus. That sounds great. I'm going to try that. Still not putting together that I couldn't focus because I had ADHD. Mm-hmm. So I was like, I'm going to go get tested and surely I can fool them into giving me this medication because whatever reason. And so I will wholeheartedly admit I was on that train. But I went to the psychiatrist and I remember now in hindsight, I can look back and laugh at this. I told him specifically about my accounting classes. I was like, I am tutoring people in the class. I have a tutor who says I know everything, and yet I'm failing all the exams. And it turned out it was like, if I didn't take the exam from the teacher who wrote it, it was a big thing. He was like, yeah, you definitely have ADHD. And I took the whole long test. So again, took the whole gamut of tests and everything. And he was like, absolutely, you have it. Here's your medication again. And then I'm like, in my brain, I'm like, haha, got him. Still not realizing that like I actually had ADHD. Yeah. So that was in my, early 20s in college, probably my senior year or so. And the medication absolutely helped, but I hated the come down off of Adderall. Like I really, really struggled with it. So in my denial of ADHD, thinking I didn't actually need the medication, I just gave up everything, like completely. And so it wasn't until probably the last 2 years or so during COVID where I was like, oh, wait. Yeah. Whoops. I didn't trick him. Yeah. Maybe all the struggles that I've had all along, maybe there was no fooling anybody. And this was actually, a much, much bigger part of my life than I realized. So I just think of that sound, that trending sound that used to exist, that it was Agatha all along. Yeah, pretty much. And I was like, yeah, good job, Lisbeth. Yeah. It can't fool me. Yeah, it was, oh geez. But yeah, so it definitely coming to terms with it over the last couple of years and realizing maybe I didn't fool anyone.
Well, so you are a yoga and breathwork coach. So how did you get into that then along this whole pathway?
So in the extreme denial of my ADHD, I went into the corporate world, and because I was off medication, I found ways of coping to get things done and to do very, very well
Mhm.
in that world by burning myself out completely.
Yeah.
And the high highs, the low lows, and just completely working myself to death. At one point I took about 150 trips in 2 years for my job. I was just work, or crash.
Mhm.
And all the fun things that go with that: emotional dysregulation, physical health decline, all of those things. So finally, in a transition from working, I had opened up one of our company offices in Singapore, and I was transitioning over to Dubai. One of my very lovely bosses, and I hope everyone gets a boss like this at some point in their life, was like, nobody email Lisbeth for 2 weeks. He's like, you don't need to be on. You don't need to be, nobody needs to contact you. He emailed everyone and was like, she's on vacation, don't touch her. Which is
Awesome.
phenomenal.
Yeah.
And in that time period, I went to visit a friend who had recently become a yoga teacher. She lived in Spain. My first yoga class was in Spanish, and I don't speak Spanish. Which in now thinking about the way my brain works with ADHD, I'm like, maybe that was actually better because I
Yeah.
wasn't focusing on anything but trying to follow the movements
Mhm.
and my body. And that was the first time I can say I had like actually reconnected to my body in I don't know how long.
Yeah.
And the opportunity to just focus on for 1 hour, nothing else but breath and movement. And I was like, what just happened?
It must have been really
And
powerful.
it was. And I had tried yoga before and hated it. And this, for whatever reason, this time kind of kicked in, and it was just like for that period of time. And so that became my routine. Actually, I was still in the corporate world, but that became my routine. Yoga was my time to shut everything off and just breathe and move. That was it. Breathe and move. And that's kind of how I discovered and fell into using this as a tool.
Yeah. So how do you think it impacted your ADHD, especially being unmedicated at that time? Did it help in
Yeah.
any ways? Um,
Absolutely. So I think it was, and especially knowing now what I know about our nervous system, which I can go into detail on later if you want, but it was the time of the day where I call it wringing out the sponge.
mhm.
Like I always say, like we've got this sponge every day, and if we don't continuously, there's preventative and restorative. And there's the point, preventative is like consistently wringing it out so that it doesn't fill up and you can continue to add water, and restorative is like once it's fully filled up, you have to like wring it out. So I would use those practices, preventative and restorative. So for me, especially when it was kind of this preventative practice of like wringing out my sponge a little bit every day. And so I was able to kind of manage more, especially when it came to emotional regulation. Now looking back at it
Yep.
and realizing how dysregulated I was in that space,
Mhm.
realizing how much of an impact it had on my emotional regulation.
Yeah.
Where my sponge just didn't feel the same way anymore that it used to, which was phenomenal.
Yeah. And there have been tons of studies on how, emotional regulation can be better regulated, or
Absolutely.
emotional control can be better regulated through the use of things like yoga, breath work, meditation, mindfulness. There's
Mhm.
I have a whole resource list of
Yeah,
documents saying
exactly.
that.
Absolutely. And yeah, especially from the ADHD component too, it really did help. It helps with like, I mean, obviously my brain is still running a mile a minute. Like, I mean, I
Mhm.
was still consistently having that, but it didn't feel out of control, is what I
Yeah.
said. Like when I had those practices, it never felt like I was, because again, I was still unmedicated. It just didn't feel like it would like fully run amok. They were still
Yeah.
there. It's still noisy. It's still busy in there, but it was just controlled chaos.
Yeah.
Is what it was.
Or
Yeah,
coordinated chaos.
yeah, it didn't change me. It just kind of made everything start to go, in the same traffic flow.
Yeah. So I have a question for you then. because this is something I've had with my own experience with like meditation and mindfulness practice. Do you find that there are moments though where you actually get that crazy silence?
Oh, like the pocket of like nothingness.
Yeah.
I will say, once I started to realize that I wasn't going to have that the entire practice.
Yes, because it will not be there the whole time.
It will not be there the whole practice. It was definitely easier to access those moments, because I feel like when you think that that's what meditation and that stuff is supposed to be, you're constantly just looking for it, and your brain just gets louder and louder and louder. And then when somebody finally told me, they're like, no, that just comes in like little moments. Like the awareness you have of getting distracted and coming back is the actual practice. And I was like, oh, okay. So now I definitely have more of those just pockets of like, whew, like it's just quiet. They don't last long.
No. And
they don't last long, but they're there. Yeah.
Yeah. And for me personally, I find they don't happen during like when I'm actively like doing formal practice. It happens like in moments like this, like where I can just be in the conversation with you and not be thinking about what happened right before. Now, it'll last for like 30 seconds here or there, but
yeah, they don't last extremely long, but they definitely, and with the practice, they start to come more frequently. But yeah, when I realized that like it was my whole 30-minute meditation wasn't going to feel like that. My meditations definitely changed after that, because I was like, oh wait, it's not supposed to be silent for 30 minutes. Like that's not gonna happen in anyone's brain, not just neurodivergent. That doesn't happen in anyone's brain for meditation. But yeah.
And learning about the monkey mind is what changed that for me, because that was part of the practice, like written by the Buddhist monks, that you are going to have a monkey that jumps from branch to branch. That's part of it. And you just need to allow the monkey to do its jumps and kind of follow it with some curiosity and say, why is it going there?
Yeah, exactly.
And approaching it that way, like changed everything.
Well, and it just gives you much more of like there's no right or wrong way to do it. I think initially when I started practicing, and honestly, there's certain times where it still comes in every once in a while, is like, am I doing it the right way? And am I doing this right? And I think everybody goes through that period. And being like, no, I'm sitting here and I'm paying attention. That's the only thing I have to do. That's it. That's all I have to do. And just follow it. Let it go. So
is there anything about yoga that, how do I want to phrase this? Yoga versus traditional like meditation, because yoga is more movement meditation. So would you say that yoga is a more helpful form of meditation for ADHDers, or what are your thoughts kind of on that?
I think everybody comes to the different practices in their own time. So for me, yoga was my first access to it, because I think I needed that movement piece. I needed to be back in my body first. I don't necessarily think that that's everybody's first intro, because a lot of people can have a lot more aversion to movement, and that can stress them out more. So I usually say like, try it all. Is what I typically recommend to people. But what I do love about the movement piece of it, I call it getting my wiggles out. Like I have to get my wiggles out during the day, whether it's the gym, whether it's yoga, whatever it may be. Now, for me, my practice of yoga has definitely shifted over the years. So I started out with hot power vinyasa. My ADHD, my like extremist brain at the time when I started, needed intensity. It needed fast and powerful movement and like strength-based stuff. That's what I needed at the time. My practice very much changed over time with the same way that I manage my mental health and my ADHD. Over time, my practice has shifted. So I usually try to tell people when they're first getting into it, I'm like, try lots. There are so many different styles. Try all the different styles. And it's the same exact way I have people approach breath. Meet your energy where it's at. So like, if it's your first time coming to something and you are crazy high energy, and all of a sudden you're in like the slowest, quietest yoga class ever, it may be the most amazing thing for you, or it can be the most challenging thing
Yeah.
for you, because you're like, all I want to do is move fast.
Yeah.
So you need to meet your energy area. Find something a little quicker paced. Find something that, there's so much. I will never like poo-poo on different styles of yoga, because I think every single style is necessary for a different reason.
Mm-hmm.
And in that, if somebody then is low energy and struggling to like even get off the couch, a high energy class like that might be like the complete opposite, like absolutely not, I'm not doing this. So where that gets to be met is then in something a little bit slower or something a little more gentle. So meeting yourself where you are at the time to then shift into a different, a different reset is what I typically recommend for people. Cause otherwise it can be you don't want to create more stress through yoga.
Yeah.
Like, you don't want to create more stress.
Do you have any recommendations for people who do find, especially ADHDers, who find either of those practices boring? Because that's one of the common complaints is that, you can't expect me to sit still and do this or do that. It's too boring. So what would you recommend to people who are at that place on their journey?
So if you're an ADHDer who likes a lot of like stimulation during a practice, so it's like the slowness, whatever, it's just too boring. When I teach, and I'm one of those teachers where I'm like, you're either going to love my class or not. And that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's different teachers for everybody. Like it is totally okay if my class isn't for you. That's fine. But because I am an ADHD and partly one, because I'm an ADHDer who teaches, but also because I understand that there's a lot of people who come to it feeling that way. I'm somebody who does typically talk quite a bit during class.
Mm-hmm.
So whether it's cueing multiple cues or literally sometimes just making jokes and having conversations during the class, keeping the stimulation going, not only in the physical body, but also allowing the mind something to attach to that isn't your mind like running away.
Yeah.
Like, am I doing this pose perfect? Am I doing this? Am I doing that? Find you a teacher that talks a lot. If that helps, like find you one. Now, if you're an ADHDer who finds that super distracting and you hate that, then find a quieter teacher. But my advice to people who think it is boring is to get really, really curious too about what does boring feel like as well in the practice. Yeah. So what does boring feel like in the body? What does boring feel like in the mind? Is it getting busier? Are you feeling agitated to leave a pose? Are you feeling, because if some of those things are the case, part of the practice isn't being able to nail a yoga pose. It's being able to observe that energy and those feelings in the moment. So if we can observe and be like, why am I bored? What do I feel like is boring? Then we can resource to see how to meet the energy where it's at then. Yeah. So then that's when you get to kind of really start to dig in and discover like, oh, well, then what do I need? Mm-hmm. What do I need? If I'm feeling agitated, if I'm feeling bored, what do I need? And maybe I need a different type of yoga. Maybe I need a different teacher. Maybe I need to go get my wiggles out and then do yoga. Maybe I need like that resource piece after that. So is kind of what I encourage people. I'm like, awesome, you get bored. That's so cool that you noticed that. Yeah.
Well, and one of my favorite questions to ask is why.
Yeah. Why?
That's something that I ask all the ADHDers that I know would work with and see that are struggling is, ask yourself, why is this a struggle? Because that really can lead to those types of solutions, which is great. But the other thing is too, and this is just like on the ADHD end, it can be helpful to be bored. Yeah. You know, it's
Absolutely.
not bad to be bored, because what it teaches us then is how to handle those other boring moments. So just
Mhm.
because something may start out as boring with, you know, one of these types of practices for wellness, mindfulness, meditation, yoga, breath work, whatever, that may actually help you in other areas too.
Absolutely. I somehow made it onto gentle parenting TikTok. I don't have children. Maybe it's what I needed. And TikTok's like, here you go. You're healing your inner child. The algorithm's so smart. But
Yeah.
anyways, somehow I made it under gentle parenting TikTok. And one of the creators on there was saying her daughter consistently tells her, I'm bored, I'm bored, I'm bored. And she's like, I could solve it for her. I could give her a bunch of things to do. And her daughter, if I remember correctly, I think her daughter might be ADHD or something. I can't remember.
Mhm.
I could be mixing up my algorithm, but but either way, she tells her, she's like, that is so great. I can't wait to see what you do and what you do to fill that time. I can't wait to see how uh how you get to entertain yourself now, or something. Like, she gets really excited for her when she's bored, and encourages her to like get curious and do things she loves. I'm like, I love that. I know. And I was like, I need that. Thanks, TikTok. I'm bored. She's like, I can't wait to see what you do with that. And she's like, she
Yeah.
comes up with the most creative things, and like always, does a project or something in the middle. I'm like, oh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what she said. She's like, it helps her in the other times in her life when she's not going to be stimulated, and there's nobody that's going to go and do something that's going to stimulate her. And I can't be the rescuer, or somebody else can't be. She has to learn that on her own. And I was like,
Yeah.
that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's kind of the thought process behind my 2 low dopamine to 1 high dopamine hack. That's actually like the reason that ADHD TikTok like took me in and accepted me. Was that video like almost 2 years ago.
Oh my goodness.
But it's the idea that, you know, you try to put in more of those tasks that take time to get to that pleasure center, that release that dopamine that you're looking for. Because, you know,
Yeah.
TikTok, TV, like computer games, video games, whatever, they all release that dopamine really instantaneously. So, and we have at the tips of our fingers all the time, this resource for that stimulation.
Yeah.
But it goes away just as quickly. So if we can find a balance and incorporate more of those like arts and crafts and reading and just going outside, doing meditation and yoga and breath work and all of these other low dopamine things, low dopamine doesn't have to mean low pleasure. It just means that it takes longer to get to that result. And
Yeah.
when we can be comfortable with that, it makes a lot of those other things that we kind of have to do that we don't want to do, like dishes and laundry, it can actually help make those not be as boring too.
Yes, absolutely. It's interesting you say that, because that's what I tell people. I was like, how we breathe is how we live life. So
Mhm.
if like we are sitting there and we're like, I'm bored, I can't breathe, I can't I need something else. I need something else. That's such a great observation. So when you're like, what about when people get bored with practices? I'm like, yeah, do you get bored with like regular tasks too? It is a super easy, low risk way of practicing here so that you can do the things there. So exactly what you're saying. Like, yeah, like translates over for sure. Cause yeah, I'm like, how we do those things is how we do life. And yeah,
Yeah.
it's a great way to hone skills.
So let's talk about you a little more. What is your training? I know you shared how you got to, you know, the practice, but I know that you have a lot of really great background in the education side of it. So I would love to talk about that.
Sure. Yeah. So I talked a little bit about my kind of, how I came to it in my job between Singapore and Dubai. When I was in Dubai, I kind of realized that I wanted to step away from the corporate world a little bit, and being in the oil and gas industry, it's very cyclical, and it kind of gave me the little push that I needed to, when the market went down, they said, we want you to move back to Houston. Funny enough, I wound up back in Houston anyway, but at the time I was like, nope, this is my time to kind of, if I don't do this now, I'm never going to do it. thank you for the offer. And I'm going to go my own way for a little while. And I had already started teaching yoga, and really realized that I wanted to dive into a lot of the other pieces that made up the productivity, the mindfulness. Like, how does this actually get used in day-to-day life? And so I dug in. My initial training was in hot power vinyasa, because that's what I liked. And I remember I started teaching in Dubai because one of the studio managers was like, genuinely, this is how it went. It was, I just finished my training. She goes, great, we have a teacher leaving. Do you want to teach? I'd never taught a class before in my life. And I was like, yeah, sure.
No ADHD impulsivity there, right?
Exactly. I was like, yeah, sure. I was so scared. But I had started teaching. So my initial training was in hot power vinyasa, but in the methodology that was taught, there was quite a bit of like leadership methodology taught in that. So it was like leadership through yoga. And I've since moved away from that organization some, but a lot of kind of that, what happens on your mat is what reflects off your mat mentality shifted into a lot of my trainings, or into a lot of my teaching. So I initially came at it in that format. And then when I moved to Houston, I got involved with organizations that were fighting human trafficking. And I realized that I wanted to extend this, but I wanted to do it in a very more intentional way with the people that I was teaching. I began teaching survivors of human trafficking. I began teaching service providers, people who were working with survivors. And so I started to dive into a lot of trauma-informed training as well. And that's when I started understanding a lot more about the nervous system and what happens to our nervous system, and the fact that everyone has experienced some form of trauma in their life. It's something like 98%. I'm like, if we really want to say 98%, let's just say 100% of people. And especially now after the pandemic. But so I really started digging into that. So I am a 200-hour ERYT, which means that I can actually train other yoga teachers. And I'm a 500-hour RYT. So I've done lots of trainings along the way. And then I also am a level 2 trauma-informed yoga teacher. And then in digging further, because in true hyper-focus fashion, I'm like, I need to know everything about everything. And I still will never know everything about everything in this realm. And it continues to fascinate me every day. I went and got a master's degree in positive leadership strategy and transformation from a school in Madrid, IE Madrid, that really explained how mindfulness and positive psychology, when implemented into organizations, can really effectively transform the way we work and live as well. So I went back and kind of really dug into that. So that was a combination of like varying facets of positive psychology and applied positive psychology, and then also a huge component of mindfulness and embodied leadership. Funny enough, there was actually a big yoga component too that I was like, really? So yeah, I aced that one, but it was a really interesting program that implemented all the science behind everything that I had been teaching and doing. It really dug into the science and the organizational applications. And then in the process, once more, in getting really nerdy about it all, I then did another very intensive 8-month breathwork training as well, with pause breathwork. And it's a trauma-informed methodology, which really resonated with me, because I believe, just like with anything else, when we move into breath or movement, there are aspects that if we still do too much too soon, and when, especially as ADHDers, we're like, we want to do it all now and really fast.
Oh no, we're not all or nothing.
Yeah,
exactly. What you're talking about.
All or nothing. I've had so many people now, they're like, I didn't get the like major like hallucination dopamine with breath work and stuff. And I'm like, I'm like, okay, give yourself some time. It's okay. Like you can have that and it might not happen every time. It's so funny. So I did a very long, intensive pause breathwork training, and I've been doing privates and some group sessions with that ever since as well. And the breathwork piece is just, I will say, has been like the cherry on top of all of my practices. I had to go on my journey to get to that one. And incorporating all of those things together is now my absolute favorite way to teach anything, whether it's in organizations or to individuals or to survivors. Blending kind of all of those pieces together is what it just lights me up at the end of the day.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned working with groups. So I think that's a good segue into talking about our group a little bit. What are you most excited about with our group?
Oh, what am I most excited? Dumping my entire toolbox into the group. That's what I'm most excited about. No, I'm most excited about getting to know what resonates and doesn't resonate in a virtual format with the group. So I think one of my main focuses is creating things that are very accessible to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And that changes from group to group. Like it just does. And so I'm really excited to see what begins to resonate and what doesn't, so that I can curate things that are really, that people are really able to apply in the moment. Because I do have a very, very large toolbox of resources. I do have a lot of hours behind me. And so being able to then curate an experience that somebody can use when they really, truly need it, curate, tools and help people build their own toolbox of resources. That's what I'm most excited about. I'm most excited about just adding to those things. I talk a lot about like pause, resource, respond. And that resource piece is probably my favorite because I go to my resource toolbox all the time. What do I need? What do I need? Mm-hmm. So I want, when people ask themselves that question, what do I need? I want to be able to give as many of the tools that I have in my arsenal to them to be able to select that and to educate on why those tools work. Like, what is the science behind it? What is this doing to my body? So that when they do look at what they need, they can be like, oh, I know that this does this.
Yeah.
And then the other piece that I'm excited about just with like the live sessions is just to like bring a moment to actually enact some of that. So actually give space to people in the group, a moment to access those things. So I can educate and give it to you all day long. And then the piece where you actually get to join me is the piece where you have a moment in your day for yourself that you get to use some of these tools. Yeah. So yeah, those are kind of the things I'm most excited about.
Now, how about for the skeptics? What is your favorite thing to teach to people who are skeptical about going into these types of wellness practices?
Yeah, I say embrace it. I actually really like the skepticism. So funny enough, I'll tell a quick story on this, a really quick story. I really do love the skeptics. So I do a lot of mindfulness in organizations, which people are like, okay, that sounds like ridiculous. Like a lot of people are like, oh, it sounds like woo woo is like kind of the word they use, like really woo woo stuff. And I'm like, okay, let's break it down. So, but I had a guy in an airport. This was actually on my way to Madrid to interview for the program that I was joining. And he asked me what I was doing. And I said, well, I'm going to be doing this program and it implements this and this and this. And he's like, oh, it's all hogwash or something. I can't even remember the word he used. Poppycock. Who knows? and I was like, oh, that's really interesting that you say that. And, tell me why. Like, again, I love the skepticism. And he was talking about, oh, well, how he owns his own organization and his salespeople. And he doesn't care what their balance is. Like, as long as they're making him money, he doesn't care if they're like overworked or whatever. And I was like, oh, okay. And I said, well, if that's true, if you don't care that they're overworking themselves, like if you don't care that the productivity levels can lower in that way or whatever, like I totally get that. Well, no, I mean, I care about them. I want them to be happy is what he says. And so I'm like, okay, I'm like, see, so you do care. You do want them to be happy. And we just started to have this beautiful conversation around what creating that balance is, and that, it doesn't have to be an all or nothing mentality. It's not all of a sudden you've dove in and this is now you don't have to do what I did, where you dive in and then all of a sudden it becomes your entire life. But by the end of the conversation, I remember him saying, thank you for giving me a new perspective, and for not arguing with me. And I'm going to think about this.
That's
And
awesome.
so my goal in anything I do is, if you're like, I'm just going to think about this, I'm just going to like think about it a little bit more. And I love to have discussions on what you were skeptical about. Like, let's talk. There's a lot of stuff that I don't know that I can be wrong on. And I love finding those out too. Like, does it hurt a little bit sometimes? Yeah.
Yeah.
But I love hearing about that and working through and being like, okay, what are you skeptical about? What is this? Oftentimes it's that there hasn't been a practice that they found that feels good for them.
Yeah.
And that's where that getting curious piece, the like, if I can just go, that's interesting. That's interesting. If you can just go, that's interesting. Let me try a different way. So skepticism is bred from curiosity, but sometimes goes into the hard no side. But if we can embrace the curiosity piece, yes, and just stay, you don't have to go to the yes side. If you could just go to the maybe side.
Just have that openness too.
And just have the openness that comes with skepticism, really. Because like you've already kind of done it and you're like, I don't know about that. There's still something in there that's like, but maybe.
Yeah.
Then if you can just stick with that a little bit and try a bunch of the different practices, I'm going to offer down regulating tools. I'm going to offer stimulating tools, different types of breath, different types of movement. Just see if there's anything that feels good for you.
I love that.
The just maybe piece.
Yeah. And I do think that is going to be one of the challenges that, some people who sign on may be facing, is that all or nothing. But that's also why the way that we have this group set up is, you are getting some amazing instructors, but also, hi, I'm an ADHD coach. So I'm going to be, yeah. So that's what one of my days of focus is going to be on, is the executive dysfunction of how do I even start? You may really want to do yoga practice, but how does that even begin? Like, I can't get off my couch to do the other stuff I need to do. How am I going to go do yoga? So,
interestingly enough, I will have some chair sessions too. So I teach chair yoga and I teach teachers how to teach chair yoga. And so if you have zero desire to get off your couch, there will be chair sessions.
Amazing.
A lot of my classes with a lot of my survivors are, varying levels of interest and engagement in classes. And so I've gotten very good at teaching half a class on a floor, half a class standing, half a class like in the chairs, like people that are in lots of different formats. So yeah, if you can't get off your couch, then there will be a session for that as well. Yeah. There will be a bed session, like when you get up in the morning, like stretching, like in bed, if getting out of bed is hard. So there's going to be, and I will have everything very clearly labeled to like the energy level that it matches. So yeah, if you can't get out of bed, can't get off the couch, there will be sessions for you still.
I love that. Yeah. And the other thing that we'll be kind of working on that ADHD side is the all or nothing part of it. How do we find balance? How do we do just a few minutes to begin with? Because we're allowed to do that. And sometimes it's as simple for breaking all or nothing as someone telling you you're allowed to do just a little bit. It doesn't have to be diving straight in, but that's one of the things that, on my end, I'm going to be bringing in to help everyone kind of work through I really, 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 really want to do yoga, but I don't have the time to do it 24/7. Well, no, you don't have to.
Exactly. I always tell people when they come to my class too, I'm like, if your yoga today is like doing like one pose. If your yoga today is just listening and breathing and laying on a yoga mat, then you have done yoga today.
Yeah.
Like you have still done yoga today. I have walked into friends' classes before and I'm like, I'm going to be on my mat and just crying. And that's but I need to be here. I need to be here listening. So my yoga is going to be in the back of the class crying. And she's like, sweet, go for it. Like, literally, that is what I did.
Yeah.
Like I wasn't lying. Like I maybe did a pose or two, but for the most part, I just laid on the back of the mat crying. And that was my yoga for that day. Like, because that is also yoga. Like it is meeting yourself where you're at and moving. And so, yeah, you don't have to dive in and do it all. You can take a minute. You can just listen and lay and in my case, cry, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and one other question that I do have though about approaching things from a different perspective is you had mentioned earlier that there are some folks, and I definitely know this from personal experience too, that they might have an aversion to moving their bodies. So what do you kind of approach that with? What have you found to be most helpful? Because I'm sure we're going to have a few people in our group that really do have that struggle. And one thing that we've all of us coaches have talked about is curating a space that feels safe for all bodies. That it is not, we are not a place that does any kind of body shaming. In fact, we encourage you to, connect with your body and meet yourself where you're at and love that version of you and who you are authentically right now. So when that translates to the movement side, what is your perspective there?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so you said some of it right there is what's right for you. What is right for you? Now, the way that I will teach as well, for those of you who can't see me, I'm a plus size yoga teacher as well. So accessibility in how we move our bodies, especially in the space of yoga, is extremely important to me. So it will be a true all levels class. We will be teaching, I will describe everything and cue everything in a manner that you can extend and express further if you choose. And you can also modify or come down from anything in any way that you choose. My number one rule when I teach is that you do what feels right for you. Your body comes first. So in every single class, I start all of my classes with the number one rule is your body comes first. My words come second. Your body comes first at all times. And like I said, I will teach as accessible as I can. And I love feedback as well. So it is a fully open space. Since it is a virtual group, I won't necessarily know what everyone's accessibility points are. And it's an open space for people to share and tell me as well. Or I am an open space too. If you're like, that didn't feel really inclusive today, Lisbeth. Like, great. That is good feedback to have as well. So part of being inclusive is being able to listen to the feedback that you're given as well. So I want to encourage anybody, if moving has been something that has been intimidating or challenging, this is definitely a space to come in and just try and also communicate with me on what does feel good, because then I can do more of that as well. So things are, when the group is saying, hey, we really liked this, or we didn't like this, that means I get to do more of that. So you have full permission to not do what doesn't feel good. You have full permission to not do any. Another thing I always say in class is, this is the 1 hour of your day. You don't actually have to listen to anything I say. I am your yoga teacher. I am not your boss. So if something doesn't feel good, guess what? You don't have to do it.
Yeah.
In fact, I encourage you not to do it if it doesn't feel good. Please don't continue. So it is a space where we are very, very open. And again, I will teach from accessibility levels as much as possible. You will know when sessions are geared towards chairs. You will know when something is going to include maybe something that it may feel a little bit more challenging to certain levels. all of that will be very, very transparent as much as I can be on that. So yeah, I don't know. Did that answer the question?
Absolutely. It absolutely did.
My ADHD thing. Did I make sense? Because I rambled.
Well, and just to add on, just so that those of you who are listening, or watching, have this opportunity to kind of learn about this group a little bit more. I know I talked about it in my last episode, but just to reiterate, you're getting 3 phenomenal coaches. We all understand the neurodiversity and how that plays a role in the different things that we'll be teaching and working with you all on, as well as you're getting access through live instruction at least once a week with each coach. So not only are we going to be putting things up on those days, with other videos, with other graphics or other parts of our toolboxes, but in addition to that, on our days, you're also getting that live instruction piece. So that's an opportunity for you to directly interact with the coach too, and to share those things that, hey, I really loved what we just did in this live instruction today. That was amazing. But if you don't get to be on that live, the live's still going to be existing in the group. And if you really did love it and you want to do that again tomorrow morning before there's another live instruction, then you can absolutely replay it, because everything is going to stay within the group. All of the resources that you're learning and getting are all right there. So that's really the focus of this, is to create that self-paced toolkit for you to have access to. How do I incorporate wellness into my neurodivergent mind and body?
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I know. And I encourage you to, like, as ADHDers, sometimes it becomes the last thing that we want to do. And it's one of those things that when you do make it the first priority, somehow you don't have to manage it as much. It seems work at the beginning. It seems like work, but once it's there, I promise it is less effort in the long run. It is. And, but I know so deep in my body how hard it is to, like, jump into that start when it feels hard at first. I get it. And I promise the other side of it feels better when you prioritize your well-being, when you prioritize your wellness. The other aspects things just feel better. Will it solve all your life's problems? No, but will people still be rude sometimes? Yes.
but science has proved that it helps.
It helps, and it does help dissipate some of that, that wrung out sponge feeling, where things feel so much more hard.
Yeah, I honestly think that, the way that I've incorporated some of these practices for myself is a huge reason as to why, I'm able to manage a lot of my symptoms unmedicated. Because, and that's my personal experience. Everyone is different, and everyone, my listeners know that I am not anti-medication at all. My partner is medicated because that's what he needs. I'm not able to take a stimulant because of other medical things. So, for me, the non-stimulants didn't do what I really needed it to do necessarily. So these other tools have been how I help to manage that. And everyone is different and unique, but if we can combine a lot of these things, then we get even closer to that end result that we're all looking for.
It was the same with me. I went off of, I haven't done stimulants in a long time, but I went on other non-stimulant medication, and it wasn't enough to get me where I felt like I needed to go. So yeah, supplementing with these practices is what balances me out, but I have to kind of, combine the two. I have to find the combination of the blend that kind of gets me there. So
and you got to meet yourself where you're at.
Meet yourself where you're at. Exactly.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate it. And I'm very much looking forward to working together in this amazing group that we've been building here. Any last words that you have to share with the listeners today?
Oh, I can't wait. I can't wait to meet you guys in the group. I really can't. I think it's going to be so much fun, and just getting to know what you guys need and want, and however I can help to do that is what truly makes me happy. Like I always say, if you can just leave feeling a little bit better than when you came, then I've done my job. So that's all I'm excited for, is just helping you feel a little bit better than when you got there.
I love that. And for those of you listening at home, again, Neurodivergent Mind and Body starts on April 4th. That will be our first day of live instruction and info blasting all of the amazing tools for you guys. You can sign up over at the ADHDlady.org/services, I believe is what it's under. It's under my services tab. It might say classes for the backslash. I, in ADHD fashion, did not write it down in front of me. So there you go. But if you at least go to my website and press on services, then you will find Neurodivergent Mind and Body. And we're doing an introductory rate of just $100. That gets you access to everything for the entire month of April. It's a one-time payment. So if there is any confusion, you know, it's just the one flat rate. So we are really, really excited, and especially to provide this all-in-one resource, because that's the thing, like this is as ADHD friendly as it gets. You can go and take individual, you know, journeys with all of these different pieces, but we're giving it to you in one spot to make it as friendly as we can. You know, and also I know some of my listeners are also autistic as well as ADHD, and that's something we're conscious of throughout this process as well. So, you know, there's definitely going to be access for neurodivergent minds in general. And it's not, you know, we're not trying to exclude anybody. We're trying to make this inclusive and to just provide those resources the best that we can. So I hope you guys check it out and sign up and see us on April 4th, because we have a lot of great things to teach you all. And I want to thank you again, Lisbeth, for being here today. This was a great back and forth. I loved it.
Good. Thank you so much.